All right, lesson 41, Moses. We left off last time. He was born. Pharaoh's daughter had taken him in that ark out of the Nile River and the weeds probably along, and we saw how God had made it so that in His infinite wisdom and plan, His decree, Miriam would come running down, offer to find someone who could care for and nurse the baby. And obviously that was her mother. And so we see that the young child Moses grew up in a good godly home where he could learn the stories of the people of Israel and the faithfulness of God to Adam, to Noah, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Joseph. Okay? But there's not much else known. We know that at some age, at an appropriate age, maybe you think 6 or 7 or 8, we don't know, maybe 12. Moses is taken away to live in the house of Pharaoh. He's taken by Pharaoh's daughter to live there. Again, God has, in His divine decree, infinite wisdom, done this because now Moses, being in that home, is also going to receive one of the best educations in the world at that time. The Egyptians were a learned society. Their library at Alexandria was second to none in the world. Egypt was a place of learning and knowledge. And so Moses could partake of that by being Pharaoh's daughter. He is in that house until he's 40 years old. We don't know exactly what went on. Was he continuing his schooling? He wasn't married during that time. So what things was he doing? Well, the Bible doesn't tell us. Obviously, it's not important. We might like to know what it was, what his life was like in the palace. Did he have a relationship with Pharaoh? Was he wealthy? Did he have whatever he wanted? We just don't know. Okay? But we do know that although his life was wonderful and nice and easy up in that palace, the life of the Israelites was miserable. Why was it miserable again? Why was the life of the Israelites miserable? What were they being forced to do? Colin? They were being forced to work. We can still imagine. We don't know exactly what type of plan was still in place for the young men, the young babies. Maybe Pharaoh had given up on that idea by now. We just don't know. But in the face of all that, God continued to bless the Israelites and they continued to grow and multiply. So we're going to pick up the story here. Verse 11 of chapter 2. So Exodus chapter 2, verse 11. Moses is now 40 years old. And it came to pass in those days when Moses was grown that he went out unto his brethren, meaning the Jews, the Israelites, and looked on their burdens and spied an Egyptian smiting an Hebrew, one of his brethren. So he's probably whipping him. He was a taskmaster. He saw this Egyptian who wasn't happy, probably with the Hebrew doing enough work, and so he was whipping him. And he looked this way, this is back to Moses, and he looked this way and that way, and when he saw that there was no man, he slew the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. And when he went out the second day, behold, 2 men of the Hebrews strove together. And he said to him that did the wrong, Wherefore smitest thou thy fellow? And he said, so one of the 2 that were fighting, Who made thee a prince and a judge over us? Intendest thou to kill me, as thou killedst the Egyptian? And Moses feared and said, Surely this thing is known. We'll stop there a second. Okay. So, we know Moses is 40 years old. He's probably thinking he knows of what God's plan is for him to use him as a leader to take the people out of Egypt. And Moses probably thinks, all right, I'm 40 years old, I'm leaving the house of Pharaoh, I'm forsaking it, I no longer want to be known as Pharaoh's daughter. I want to be a leader of the Israelites. And so he goes out and he looks for an opportunity in which he can be a leader, in which he can do something that will make the people look up to him. And he thinks, well, I know what that opportunity is today when he sees that Hebrew being whipped. I know what I can do. I'll kill that Egyptian, and everyone will think how great I am. See, look, he stands up for us. And so he commits the sin of murder. He kills that Egyptian. He shouldn't have done that. Then he buries that Egyptian in the sand so it can't be found. And he looks around and he knows no one has seen it. At least no Egyptians have seen it. So the next day Moses comes back. Again, his pride and how he thinks of himself is building up, and he's ready to be a leader. And this time he doesn't see an Egyptian whipping a Hebrew, but he instead sees two Hebrews fighting with each other. And he goes and he gets in the middle of them and he separates them and he chastises them. He's, again, trying to be a leader, but yet he's not necessarily going about it in the right way that God would have. And he gets in the place and he tries to separate them. And this man says, now, one of the two men who are fighting, well, what are you going to do to us? First of all, who made you ruler over us? Who put you in charge and made you a prince and a judge? Maybe making fun of the fact that, well, you lived in that nice palace for a long time. We were down here working. And now you think you can come down here and do this? What are you going to do to me? Are you going to kill me like you killed that Egyptian yesterday? And now Moses all of a sudden starts to feel some apprehension. He begins to maybe get a little bit of anxiousness in his chest, and he begins to go, well, thinks to himself, they know? Well, the word was spread around, others must obviously know. And he becomes a bit concerned and worried about this. Others know that he had killed them. Okay? So Moses here, although he has chosen to leave the palace and the easy life that there is of Pharaoh's daughter, and he's chosen to now suffer with the Israelites, it doesn't go the way that Moses wants. He wants to let them know, I'm here to do this, but he doesn't go about it the right way. Okay? What has Moses forgot? What has Moses forgot that's similar to what Jacob often forgot? Amber? He forgot to maybe pray to God and ask God how God wanted to go about this. Lord, how would you use me as a leader? How would you like me? He thinks, I'll do it my way. And that's not going to work. Moses is going to have to be humbled here. So we continue on there. Verse 15, now when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moses. But Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water, and filled the troughs to water their father's flock. And the shepherds came and drove them away, but Moses stood up and helped them and watered their flock. And when they came to Reuel, their father, he said, how is it that ye are come so soon today? And they said, an Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds, and also drew water enough for us and water the flock. And he said unto his daughters, and where is he? Why is it that ye have left the man? Call him, that he may eat bread. And Moses was content to dwell with the man, and he gave Moses Zipporah, his daughter. She bare him a son. He called his name Gershom, for he said, I have been a stranger in a strange land. This Pharaoh finds out, he learns through the grapevine, through the passing of word from one person to another, somehow, some way, that Moses, the young man who used to be the son of his daughter, the adopted son of his daughter, who lived in his palace and had great privileges, who maybe even Pharaoh knew personally, he finds out that Moses has slain an Egyptian. Pharaoh becomes upset, he becomes angry, and he wants to exact justice on Moses. What does Moses have to do here then? What does Moses need to do so that he cannot be punished by Pharaoh? Probably put to death by Pharaoh for his sin. So what does Moses need to do? Joe? What does Moses need to do? Logan? Flee. He needs to run away. He needs to get out of here before Pharaoh can catch him and put him in prison and put him to death. And so he flees. He flees, we read there, to Midian. He flees out into the desert land where it will be hard to find him. And he sits down after his wanderings. He sits down by a well, probably looking to get some water. He needs some water. And along comes some women taking care of some herds. Okay? These women are here to water their flocks. And so the top of the well is opened. They begin to pull the water out of the well, and there's troughs that are permanently kept and set up around the well, and they can pour the water into the troughs to feed their animals. Or not feed them, to water them. And while this is happening, another group of herdmen come in that are led by men, and they push out these women, these girls, and their herds because they can. They're stronger. They're the men, and they push them out, even though they probably should have waited their turn. Moses doesn't like seeing that, and he stands up. He comes to their defense. He maybe puts the other men in their place and says these women were here first, and he makes sure that these daughters of this man here, Reuel, he makes sure they are able to water their flocks. The daughters then, after their flocks have been watered, head home, leaving Moses there by the well. And when they arrive home, their father says, "Well, how is it that you've arrived home so early today? Usually it takes you much longer." Father probably knows about the trouble every time they have when they get to the well, that the others come and push them aside and it takes them so long. So he's surprised. And maybe did it go well today? Did the men not bother you, or did they not even come? And they tell the story. They say, "Well, no, Father, there was another man there, a strange man, an Egyptian, a man from Egypt." Now you remember, Moses was really Hebrew, but yet he had grown up and he had lived in the Egyptian household. So the style of his hair and his facial features and the clothing probably was that of an Egyptian. And so they say, "Well, this Egyptian delivered us. He helped us. He made sure those other shepherds left us alone, and he helped to water the flock." Their father, aghast that they wouldn't bring a man home, says, "Well, where is he? Why would you not invite him home? He helped you. Let us help him. Let's give him food. Who is he? What is he doing here?" This man also thinks, "Well, I've got these 7 daughters. Surely one of them can be married to this young man. Sounds like an upstanding young man." And so Moses is brought into the home of this man and his 7 daughters. And probably after a time he finds favor in the sight of this man and in this man's daughters, and this man gives one of his daughters, Zipporah, to Moses, so that Moses is now married, and we see he has a young son named Gershom. For he said, "I've been a stranger in the strange land." So Moses is here. What we know is that for 40 years now, another 40 years, Moses works as a shepherd. He is learning the ins and outs of life in the desert. What to do when you need water. Where to find water. What are paths through the desert? What is it like? What are the safest places to go? How to survive at night in the desert, in the wilderness. How to make sure the animals have enough food to stay alive. These are all very important things for Moses to learn, because we know he is going to be leading the people through the wilderness in the future. And he needs to be a good shepherd there. And that way Moses is preparing here to be a type of Christ so that he can do that. So for 40 years Moses is out there. And there Moses also learns humility. He learns to be meek and not so proud. He needs to learn to wait. Remember before he wanted to do things on his own time. But here now for 40 years he needs to learn to wait on God. God will give him a sign. God will call him when the time is right, when the time has come for Moses to lead the people out. Moses has the son Gershom. And eventually he has another son, Eliezer, which means God is help. But let's see now what happens next before God calls Moses. Chapter 3, verse 1. Now Moses kept the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the backside of the desert and came to the mountain of God, even to Horeb, also known here as Mount Horeb, I believe Mount Sinai. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. So it didn't burn up. Any bush I start on fire is burned up and then burned out. This bush, that did not happen. It continued to burn and burn and burn, and it never burned up. And Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush is not burnt. So Moses, when he sees it, he goes to it. And when the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called him out of the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here am I. God speaks again. He says, Draw not nigh hither. Put off thy shoes from off thy feet, for the place whereon thou standest is holy ground. Moreover, he said, I am the God of thy father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon God. So, here's Moses out in the desert, taking the flocks out to probably a place where they can be watered and they can be fed. A good place for them to continue to grow. And while he's out there in this desert, he sees a strange sight somewhere. He sees a fire, but no one around it, a flame. And in that flame, he sees a bush. And what he's amazed by is, as he probably stands there and contemplates, he probably thinks, well, that fire will go out here soon, surely. And it doesn't, and he becomes curious. Okay? And so he goes over. He's going to check it out. He's going to look at what's going on here. He's probably looking at it curious and questioningly, and he gets closer and closer. Until finally God sees that Moses has come close enough. He has now gotten the attention of Moses. And when Moses is close enough, God calls out to him and says, Moses, Moses. Again, what a surprise and a shock we would think. This is almost like Balaam in the future being on his donkey, riding, and the donkey talking to him, and he doesn't show surprise. We don't see here Moses being one bit surprised. He must have known it was God, and this was God speaking to him. So Moses answers, Here am I. Okay? God speaks to him again, okay? As you get closer, this burning bush, God is here in this place. And because God is here in this place, the land around, the ground around that burning bush is considered holy. Moses, take your shoes off. Take your sandals off. This is holy ground. Okay? It's always interesting. We don't do that going into God's house. We keep our shoes on. But if we were to go to Asian countries, we would find that going into their temples and their places of worship, and most of the time their homes, they remove their shoe wear. Now, a lot of it's steeped in superstition and such. But we see here Moses has to take his shoes off because the ground he is stepping on is holy. Okay? God then introduces himself. He says, I am the God of thy father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon God. Okay? That's what's going on here. The rest of this conversation we're going to save for our next lesson. But we do want to talk a little bit about that burning bush. And I asked you there, that last one, the burning bush is full of pictures and metaphors. What are some pictures you can think of? What'd you come up with? Amber?
The burning bush is Christ's church that can't be destroyed.
All right, good. The bush can't be destroyed. That is Christ's church. Christ's church cannot be destroyed. Colin?
Fire and brimstone and flame of oil.
Okay, could be a picture of fire and destruction. Brody?
It is a picture of the wicked being destroyed and the righteous being spared.
Okay, we can see that God is going to use fire in the end to judge, but yet God's people, even though we have sin in our lives, we won't be burned up by that judgment because Christ has saved us. Okay, that's a beautiful picture here. Okay, some other pictures that we can make. Well, the Israelites working hard and being slaved in the land of Egypt. That's like being in this burning bush. It's miserable. Okay? And yet, they won't be consumed by it. Okay? So, the fire here is troubling God's people. That work is troubling the people. But God is also using that fire, that trouble, to make it so that they're so miserable they will cry out to God and want to go on. Okay? Bush here is not burned. The Israelites will not either. God takes away, or he said it burns away our sins, but it doesn't destroy us. Okay? And so That's a picture there too. Beautiful picture. God's wrath must be satisfied. But Jesus has done that for us by his death on the cross. He has satisfied the burning of that bush, that burning that happens, so that we are not consumed, we are not destroyed as God's people. Okay? So, that fire, even though here was burning in Egypt and in the land, it still burns today. Okay? And God sends us our troubles. He sends us our difficulties, just like the Israelites had them in Egypt, working there. But we can know, you can know, it won't consume you. Anything that you have, you could have the horrible news that a parent or a brother or sister has died. That would be awful, and you might think that pain will consume you, and you won't be able to go on with life. But you will be able to by the grace of God, because he won't allow those things to consume us, just as he won't allow Israel to be consumed here in Egypt. So, we'll stop there and we'll save the rest of the conversation that Moses has here with God, because it's very telling about Moses being called by God to be a leader. Now, we see is a little bit different. If you look on your sheets here, we asked how old was Moses when he slew the Egyptian? Brody?
40.
We said 40. Okay. Acts 7 verse 25, I asked you to look that up. What did that show that Moses already knew? Colin? Yeah, he had some inclination. God had revealed to Moses that he'd be a leader. That's why he thinks he should go out and kill that Egyptian, and it's just not the right time. Okay? So, we have some of those questions. I think everything else looked very good, and we covered most of those things. So, we'll pick up our story next time with Moses and his continued conversation with God after here by the burning bush.